I would say this Facebook Live connection stuff is going to make you go bald, but it's too late. So tonight we're talking hardware and design. So I've got a bunch of stuff here on the table, and it's 10 o'clock, so we'll get right down to it. Go ahead and throw up questions as you have them. I'll answer them as quickly as I can. Let me get this camera down a little bit so you can see what's on the table. Got a whole bunch of inside the waistband, outside the waistband, belt loops and options, and some hardware here. See me? Nope, too low. Hello, Mike. All right, now can you see me? Let me turn one more light on here. Is that better? A little better. Here's usual, says Mike. Well, Mike, invite some people. Text some other holster makers. Get some other folks here, because this is going to be... I've actually prepared some stuff tonight. You can see I got my whole table set up here. I'm going to be dropping a whole bunch of information. So, a little bit of history and background first, and then we'll get into hardware options, what I like, what I recommend, things to think about when you're designing, and things to think about when you're purchasing and doing inventory. So, when I started my holster company, there were almost no options available in terms of hardware. Everybody was making outside the waistband belt loops out of Kydex, J hooks, anything you could think of, all made out of Kydex. Soft loops were almost non-existent. Overhooks were pretty common for inside the waistband carry, and they broke all the time. They were time-consuming to make. They were awful to buff. They were just miserable. And now, fast forward 8 years, we're in 2016. There are tons of options available for the holster maker, and you have so many different things to choose from that it can get a little bit overwhelming when you're thinking about your designs, what you want to do, how you would like your customers to carry, what you'd recommend to them, and deciding what you want to spend your money on as a holster maker, what you're going to put on your holsters, how much inventory you're going to stock, what kind of hardware you're going to use. All that stuff has to be decided because a lot of hardware decisions drive your product design. You can't design the holster and then later go out and try to figure out what hardware it can work with. For a seamless integration of your hardware and your holster, you have to have the hardware picked as you design the holster. Those decisions have to go together so that when you design them, everything from the profile of the holster, the ride height you design it for, whether you're going to have forward cant or not, how many adjustments you're going to give to the end user, all that is somewhat dependent on the hardware you choose. And so it isn't really a chicken and egg thing. It can be, but they really have to happen at the same time. And if you revise a design, you may have to change hardware, and if you want to change hardware, either because the price on something goes up, or it's no longer available, or you've had too many warranty issues because hardware is breaking, and you decide to switch, you may actually have to change your design in order to accommodate new hardware. Who else is here? Bobby Jackson, Conrad Miller, John Hoffman. So, when I was starting out, the holy grail that everybody was hunting for was screw posts with a slot on the back. Nobody had them. Blade Tech wasn't using them. Nobody had them. And RCS did have them. And so everybody was looking at RCS holsters going, man, where are they getting these? And you could not find them. It's called a screw post or a binding post, and they're widely used in the office supply industry for binding together thick sheets of paper, but they're always aluminum. My local hardware store had them in aluminum, and they were really expensive, and they were garbage. They didn't have a slotted back. They were a blind hole, so the back was closed off. They had a slot drive, not a Phillips, not a hex. They were awful. But that was all I had to start with. Steve Schmidt, anything coming off the brother tonight? Yes, but not on the live video. I've been running parts today, and I'll be running more parts tonight. But I don't, I can't do both at the same time. I can't multitask that well. So the brother is warmed up right now and is waiting. And once I end this Facebook broadcast, then I'll be throwing some material in the brother and cutting some more parts. Everything tonight is really short run, like minute 30 cycle times. So if I was trying to broadcast and feed the machine, I'd be out of the camera frame more than half the time. So I spent 1.5 years trying to find a company in the US to source steel slot-backed screw posts from. And I finally found a company in California, of all places, that could make them for me. Hello, Rob Kelly. And they were expensive, and I had to buy more than 10,000 at a time to get them made, but I was able to spec stainless steel and get my first slot-backed screw posts. And that's what I still use on my holsters. I still have inventory from the last time I reordered from them. And that was, like, the skies opened and light shone down the day I finally got samples from this company and opened the package and realized, yes, they actually had the hardware I was looking for. I could source it. I knew how much it cost. I could get it in quantity. I was thrilled. But I had to spend like $5,000, $4,000 or $5,000 up front to get a batch of it made. And so it was overwhelming to get into that hardware at first. Looking good, Andrew Mark says, Rob, thank you for coming over. I appreciate you spending your Friday evening with me. And so at that time, when I was doing inside the waistband and outside the waistband holsters, I was doing a lot of hybrid holsters, and I was using initially Kydex overhooks. They broke all the time. I got tired of replacing them. And so I was hunting around for spring steel overhooks. The company that had them was Crossbreed Holsters. And I did actually track down the company that is in Indiana that was making their clips. But I was going to have to spend $20,000 on tooling and minimums, and so it was unreachable for me. And so I started looking at luggage companies, travel gear supply companies, all kinds of different places, trying to find companies that made spring steel clips. And I found some. There were some narrower ones. There were a whole bunch of different profiles of clips available. Oftentimes they were available in brass finish or nickel finish, not at all what you wanted. But I really wanted one that had a tab punched in it. I don't know if you can see. This is the kind of clip that's currently used by guys like Titan Concealment and Dark Star Gear. I used these for a long time on my hybrid holsters. It's a great clip. It holds up well. They're tough to drill, but a lot of these guys are putting 2 holes in them to face mount them on an inside the waistband holster, and they work well for that. I decided to phase these out once I could reliably get snap loops, soft loops made for myself. So spring steel was the next iteration for me. As soon as I could, I ditched all the Kydex overhooks and switched to steel. I was getting mine at that time from Ohio Travel Bag and buying them hundreds at a time, not thousands, because I didn't have a lot of money to spend on inventory. I'd spend it all on screw posts. RCS at that time was using this style of outside the waistband belt clip, belt loop. It's just injection molded. It has their logo on it. I don't know if you can see that. Lighting's not great. It's got their logo on it. And these were what were on a lot of RCS outside the waistband holsters for quite a while. And I was making my own similar to this out of Kydex. And they were belt loop days in the shop, all day, just cutting plastic into strips, polishing the edges, heating it up in batches, putting it into a jig, closing the jig, folding them up, and then had a jig on my drill press for drilling them and then put them in a bin for later. And it was miserable. Dark Star Gear. Yeah, Rob Kelly. Tom Kelly from Dark Star Gear Holsters uses those metal clips. And so RCS was making these, and then RCS started making an angled version because on light bearing holsters it was difficult to get a thick gun belt around the body of the holster without too much resistance. So they came out with a loop that was flat on the wings but angled in the actual belt pocket. And those were difficult to make out of Kydex. I found a way to make a version of it, and it worked pretty well, but I wasn't completely happy with it. I wanted to find an injection molded version. And in the meantime, I was always on the hunt for soft loops. I really liked the concept of soft loops. Flexible, durable, adjustable in size. The adjustability in size was a big deal. Trying to make sure I had enough 1.5 and 1 3/4 belt loops handmade in stock all the time was a pain. And so I hunted and hunted and hunted, and I'd gotten samples from a bunch of places, and then John Hauptman at Filster started selling these really shiny 1-inch wide soft loops. And I think he was sourcing the webbing from a company in Indianapolis, not too far from me. And I bought a few from him and tried them out. I didn't like how shiny they were. I didn't like how wide they were. I had been using the all-rubber Blade Tech loops. They didn't have any fiber reinforcement. They were thick. They were kind of clumsy. And the snap setting wasn't always consistent. Some of them would close and open really nicely, and some of them were bad. So I was buying those and using those and hunting for something better. It was the best I could find at the time, says John. Yeah, we were all using the best we could find at the time. Now we look back and say, man, that stuff was not good, but it was good at the time. And so eventually I ended up tracking down Biofane webbing out of Ohio and paying for tooling, and got my first, I remember the day, I got my first batch of 2,000 soft loops delivered. And I still had to set the snaps and do all that work, but I actually had my own soft loops made to my spec of the webbing I wanted, and I was thrilled. That was a huge step up for me. One of the main ways holster companies differentiated themselves from their competitors was by having good quality proprietary hardware that nobody else had. And you couldn't call anybody up and get info, with a very few exceptions. You couldn't call any of the big companies and find out anything about where they sourced any of their stuff. Everybody was very tight-lipped about it, because if you gave that away, that was giving away the distinctives of your brand. So I got these soft loops, and I decided that in order to start getting them in quantity, I was going to need to start wholesaling them. So I linked up with the guys at HolsterLoops.com and started supplying these to them. These were their original soft loops. And I also started selling these to KnifeKits.com, and I still do. They still stock my loops. And that was great. I loved having soft loops. I started eliminating some other hardware options that I used. And I was trying to find a way to make sure that screws were common across my holster types. When I was doing hybrids, I was using non-stainless steel 3/32 Allen key hex drive screws with finish washers. And the heads on those were too wide to use with soft loops. The snap wouldn't close all the way. And so I had to switch to a Phillips screw with a smaller head. Owen, the 100 skeletons are in a bin over there on the other side of the shop. I was making them today. They're coming. Cool your jets. Just cool your jets. So yeah, John passed off production on his loops over to Index, and they started filling more high-volume orders for a bunch of other holster makers. I was still getting my own from Biofane, and I still do. I still get all my own direct from Biofane. And I started eliminating hardware options, but I was trying to find a way to keep screws common across my designs so that I wouldn't have to keep track of multiple kinds of screws, and if a customer lost a screw, find out which screw on which part of the holster they'd lost and make sure to send them the right head type and the right length and the right drive to match what they already had. Making skulls. No, Rob Kelly. I do the manufacturing on all of John Hauptman's Filster skeleton line of holsters. They're all vacuum formed and CNC drilled and cut here in my shop, and then I send them off to Philadelphia to him for edge finishing and assembly. And Owen is his distributor, so Owen's nagging me because he's low on inventory and it has to come from me and then go to John and then go to him. So, working on it. So I switched to all flathead 18/8 stainless steel Phillips drive machine screws, which were able to be used with a finish washer for outside the waistband or with snap loops inside the waistband work. And that was a big step that allowed me to simplify my inventory. I could stock different lengths, but I didn't have to keep track of different head types. RCS at the time was using pan or oval head screws, which are angled on the underside and domed on the top. I still don't use those for much, although I do stock them so I can test holster designs that use them. There were a couple different companies then bringing to market slot back screw posts. DIY has some that they sell, as you can get those from them. Index Fastener has them now. And then people started opening up new options for injection molded outside the waistband loops. These ones are from HolsterLoops.com. It's basically an analog to the original RCS outside the waistband loops. Hello, Rick. Although they're bare without logo, you can get them with a logo injection molded on them. I don't, but you can. And then DIY started marketing these closed loops, which are a fully closed but square shape with holes pre-drilled. Holes pre-drilled was a big feature. Initially, some loops were offered on the market without holes drilled, and you save some time, you gain some consistency, and injection molded stuff is more durable, but you still end up spending a lot of time drilling them. You have to make a jig, and you run the risk of ruining parts or having inconsistencies that affect the angle that the clips run at, the ride height the overall holster runs at. The trade-off is, if they come with the holes already drilled, you're kind of stuck with that. You don't have the ability to change the spacing or adjust and custom drill loops for specific holsters or unusual applications. So always trade-offs. All the decisions in hardware are all about trade-offs. Then for soft loops, guys wanted tuckable. So struts started coming out, and people were using different systems. People were making Kydex struts, and then there are a few different options on the market now. So there was an original RCS tuckable strut that was injection molded for use with soft loops. Then there's this version. I'm not sure if the current version is just like this, but this is from Index Fastener. 2 holes on the bottom, 4 on the top. Some guys use these and like them. Some guys tried them and thought they were too flexible, didn't like them. I don't use these, but I have samples for testing and for trying on holster designs. Holster Loops came out with an injection molded version that was 3+3 with a nice offset in it. This was the standard version and still is on my appendix tuckable holsters. Although I usually cut off that bottom hole. I tab it down to 2 just to save some space at the bottom, since my appendix holsters are cut pretty tight to the body down there by the attachment point. And then more recently, when the Eidolon came out, RCS has released this version of their strut, which has a slot and has an oval hole at the bottom so you can adjust cant. Most struts except the RCS are too flimsy, says Michael Sepacek. Yeah, the holster loops ones are pretty good. They're a little firmer than the Index Fastener ones. I've not managed to break any of these, but if you really yank the holster around, they do bend a bit. My preference still is for non-tuckable appendix designs that use 2 soft loops for stability, so the holster can't rock too much. It can rock a little bit, but stability, and then the security of having 2 loops and also no linkage arm with all that leverage involved. Flat strut with spacer instead of a tall step in the loop. Okay? And that's the other thing. The RCS struts, the original version and the new slotted version, don't have nearly as steep a step in them. So you have to have a taller spacer underneath the strut in order to make up the height to clear the trigger guard without bending the loop. When I see guys using overhooks that don't have a step in them and they're not putting a tall spacer, and I'm just looking at it and the whole thing is just bent up over the trigger guard, it looks terrible. Don't do that. What were you thinking? You want a little bit of rock. Yeah, you want a little bit, but too much means that the gun isn't in a consistent position, which means you can't reliably get a good solid grip on it, and then you can't draw as confidently or as quickly. Then this was another one that came out the guys used for a while, and then there were some supply issues. And this is a big deal when it comes to hardware. When you buy hardware from somebody else and you do sort of lean inventory, where you buy small quantities at regular intervals so you're not tying up a bunch of money in inventory, 2 things happen. First, you usually pay more per piece because you're buying a smaller quantity. That's just supply and scale. You're not getting the best price per piece. The trade-off is you don't tie up a bunch of money, but the catch is if the supply is ever short or you can't get what you need, you're hung. You don't have inventory in stock. And so this is the Incog clip from G Code. And there was a big fracas for a while because people were saying that G Code had changed the formulation on the plastic. I remember this was a big deal for John at Filster. This was the standard attachment he offered for a long time with his holsters until he started getting batches that were super flexible. This is the older version, the stiffer one. G Code steadfastly maintained that they had not changed the plastic formulation, that it was the same as it had always been. But if you did squeeze tests, there was obviously a difference between some batches and others in terms of how stiff they were. It was verifiable on the ground, something had changed, and so John ended up scrambling, discontinuing them, finding a replacement, and switching to soft loops as his default. Charlie Childress, I should have sent you some stuff. Which stuff do you mean? Oh, Charlie, is that RC Holster Supply? Sure, send me some samples, I'll check them out. So I never used these. I think, honestly, they were big on the negative angle molded into this and tried to go after guys for patent pending, and it's got a reinforced, thicker part here at the top. All fine features, and the holes are ovalized rather than just round holes. That's all great. You get some adjustments for height, but I think the negative angle thing is really overblown. There are two ways. What they're trying to do is they're trying to get the muzzle of the holster to kick out. Take the top of the slide, rock it back into your body. There are two ways to do that. I call them negative space and positive space. This is negative. You're trying to leverage and pull the bottom of the holster out away from the body, and you're relying on the stiffness of the clip and the rigidity of the belt to put that camming action on the holster. Friedman says, I love the RCS ones. Yeah, I think they're good. I don't use them myself, and partly it's because I don't like putting hardware that has somebody else's logo on it on my holsters. I don't even put hardware that has my own logo on it on my holsters. So my holsters are pretty much bare of logoing. So if I put an RCS strut on it, the only logo on the thing I'm sending out is theirs, not mine, which I don't like. So this is negative space. You're trying to pull out. What my holsters have, let me grab one. And you can see this in Instagram photos. I was one of the first guys to do a hard molded kick on the back of my holsters. It goes back to, I don't know, 2010 when I started doing them. It's angled this way, and it's also angled this way from the slide up toward the muzzle. It gets taller as you go closer to the muzzle. This doesn't rely on any kind of clip to pull. This just sits against your pelvis, and it pushes the muzzle of the holster out. You can't avoid it. It's positive space. It's molded in there. That dimension is added. No matter what, it's going to have the desired effect. And it also means that at the belt line, the overall holster is slimmer. So I was able to use soft loops and not have to have any fancy or complicated blocking up here at the top of the holster. Some guys were putting extra blocking over the trigger guard so the belt would press against it and roll the holster, grip towards your body. I know Tom at Dark Star Gear does this. Tony Mayer at JM Custom Products does this. There are a lot of guys doing it. I don't like it, and I don't do it. I don't think it's necessary. I think there are lower profile, less complicated ways to accomplish that goal, and you also are able to do it without losing the ability to mold retention on your trigger guard on both sides. When you have a big block over or partially over the trigger guard on the front, you lose the ability to lock as securely on the pistol, which is a trade-off I'm not willing to make on my own holsters. New HH swag. Not sure which HH swag you mean, Rob. So that's the quick negative positive space. Negative is trying to use attachments to pull. Positive is using blocking shapes to push. So this kicks the muzzle out, and it also rotates the grip back because it's angled this way. In addition, that slide side loop is angled in relation to the face of the gun. It's not flat. And so it wants to even the two loops out on the belt, which also rotates the grip of the gun a little bit. So that was my appendix design. I still make it this way. This one, this is the newest version with adjustable ride height and cant, so you can also wear it strong side inside the waistband. But a lot of hardware decisions went into this. The two loop, soft loop, no strut, nothing else fancy, as simple as possible, directly mounted. That's my preference. That's what I like best. That's what I recommend. That's what I carry. So there were a bunch of different strut options, some better than others, some more durable than others. With the Eidolon, RCS also came out with this overhook, which has the same two holes and then a slot so you can adjust cant. I'm not crazy about these or the new Eidolon struts, and the reason is that the material is pretty thin at these outside shoulders here, and I've seen some of these break. Not a ton, but I have seen some of them break. And also, this oval slot drives some of your screw choices. When you're dealing with plastics, if you take a flathead screw that has a tapered underside and you drive that into a plastic hole, it's going to act like a wedge and deform the plastic. Rob's talking about the Henry Holsters patches. You have the rolling. I do have some more swag to send to you then, Rob. Clark says I've had a few issues with testing them. Yeah, I have them in my shop mostly for testing. I have a lot of hardware for testing, but very, very few of them actually make it onto my holsters. Right in the adjustment area. Yeah, right at those corners where the material is thinnest, you can get leverage on there, and that's the weak point where it's going to flex and break, is at those narrow spots. And then the foamy clip. So this is another big one, which I see all over the place. There were two main competitors in this field. Now there's a few other small ones. RC Holster Supply is in it. There was a guy recently posting on Kydex Pro who had a version of the foamy style clip that had a taller flat area with molded slots, so you could adjust the ride height and angle the clip. Justin Garner, the only overhook I use, usually using coffee. You mean the RCS Eidolon overhook is the only one you use, Justin? Only post your interface with those stripes. So yeah, that's the easiest way to set them up, John, is to put the screw post on the face. In the case of my holster, if I was putting one of these loops on, one of these overhooks on here, the screw post would go down from the top, and then the machine screws would come through from the back and would interface with the eyelets on the back. Secure, strong, durable. The foamy clip. So I've seen some guys set up an outside the waistband, fold over taco style holster with one of these on the inside and the gun on the outside. Don't do that. Just don't do that. It's a terrible idea. It's not what they were designed for. They don't work very well. And I've also seen some guys using inverted applications where they put this behind the belt and hook on. I also don't dig that at all. But in these two options, you're basically putting one single wide clip on the holster body, hooking over the belt and up underneath. The advantages are it's simple, it's easy to get on and off, it's faster to take on and off than soft loops. Soft loops are a little bulkier at the top above the belt line. These are a little bulkier at the bottom below the belt line. Just depends what you prefer. Foamy clips are cancer. Well, only if you smoke them, Owen. I don't use the actual foamy brand ones, although I'm good friends with Tony at Multi Holsters. I think the DIY quick clips are hold better on the belt. It's my personal opinion from testing them. I know there were some issues with plastic formulation. The Gen 1 foamies, guys had some breakages. I think they were ABS. They changed the formulation. They offshored them. IFI has inshored them again, and so I think now the US version's available, which is great. I'm all for US made, US injection molded parts being on our holsters. I don't know, Jason Friedman. I think most of us have, speaking for holster makers, we've probably snorted enough Kydex dust that grinding up a couple of these and huffing them is probably not going to make much of a difference either way. Those brain cells are probably already gone. But if you want to have adjustable ride height or adjustable cant with these, you have to build that into your blocking, into your mounting points on the holster. You can have too high, too low, too high, two on one side, one on the other, so you can adjust the angle. But deciding which one you're going to use, because they don't ride at exactly the same height, they don't always come with the same hole spacing. I think now the factory foamies are 7/8, 0.875 on center. The factory DIYs are 1 inch on center. I make a clip drilling jig for the DIYs, so you can do 1/2 inch, 5/8, 3/4, and 7/8 easily on your own drill press. But they hold better but are weaker. Which one is weaker, Mike? I want to know which one you thinks holds better but is weaker. But these are a very popular option for inside the waistband. Gun stores like these. They don't seem to like soft loops as much, which is a shame. Yeah, a pound. I'd be surprised if there was less than 5 pounds on top of your bench. I know how often you didn't clean that thing, John. But either of these are viable options, but you're always making decisions when you design. Another big one is adjustable retention versus non-adjustable retention. On outside the waistband holsters, it affects the overall width of your holster since you have to leave space on one side to put your retention spacing and hardware in. On inside the waistband holsters, you're looking at 1 retention screw or 2 below the trigger guard, or 1 plus an eyelet, 1 plus 2 eyelets, any combination of those. And that affects what other hardware you can use. For a while, I was working on a design that was a single strut, single soft loop, tuckable, with 2 adjustable retention screws that were shared through the strut. So I was using a split mold, trimming my shape, using eyelets to hard attach the strut to the shell, then folding shut and running my retention screws through the holster body. It was great, except if you ever destroyed a strut, it was permanently attached to the holster body. You couldn't take it apart. It was a bad idea. I tried it for a while and then ended up scrapping it. Mike says the DIY clips hold better, but are not as durable. Rob, my everyday carry is a Glock 17 with X300 Ultra B. That's what I cart around. 2 soft loops. I like it. Pretty comfortable. Not ideal for like bike riding, but pretty good for everyday carry for me. The DIY flex more, but hold well on the belt, so it cancels itself out. Says Mike. On screw. Oh, a few other odds and ends pieces of hardware. I just had a phone conversation earlier this evening with one of my mold clients about these guys. And I know you guys recognize these. These are the injection molded OTG hex angled trapezoidal outside the waistband loops from Index. Rob Tran designed them. This was basically, the prototype came in Kydex form and they said duplicate this. And I hate this loop. I think these are one of the worst attachments on the market. I don't understand why people use them. I have nothing personal against OTG hex. I've never met Rob Tran. I really don't think these are good. And part of the reason is because they were a handmade Kydex design adapted directly into injection molding without taking advantage of any of the advantages that injection molding could produce. Those are the only ones you use for outside the waistband? Ugh. Well, I don't mean to upset you, Jason. I think these are a bad option. The fact that they're open on one side means when you tighten these guys down, the 2 tabs can torque and offset. Oh, those are just terrible. Just, oh, it makes me sad. Just terrible. The reason they're like that is because they were originally a strip of Kydex that was drilled at both ends and folded, or folded and then drilled. Doesn't matter. But it was a strip of Kydex. You couldn't make it into a continuous loop. That's a design flaw. That's a design problem. To take that design problem and build it into the injection molded version is crazy. There's no reason to do that. So I don't like these. The other issue is on this style of loop, a trapezoidal loop, where you have 3 square sides and 1 angled side, the mounting holes should be in this square side. They're not. They're in the angled side. It orients the loop wrong on the holster body. It either requires you to dive in even tighter to make it even harder to pass the belt around the holster body, or you switch sides and it gives you negative angle depending on what your ring angles are. It can take you beyond parallel, and put you at outside angle, negative angle. I have no use for them. The ones, Dave at NSR Tactical released these ones, and these are very similar to the US-made injection molded ones that Index currently sells, which I think are made by Booth at Armadillo Concealment. He doesn't make them, but his tooling. And I don't know exactly what material Dave White at NSR is using. This is the same basic design. It's a fully closed angled loop. He does 3 holes in his. The Index ones have 1 hole and a little bit of an ovalized slot, so you have a little bit of adjustability, a little bit of play on your hole spacing. these outside the waistband fully closed loops that are fairly short, top to bottom, they're, the attachment is buried inside the loop profile. These have pluses and minuses. They have trade-offs. So first, the advantages, and there are big advantages. First, you can actually run the outside the waistband holster lower. If you have to have the attachment tab for your hardware above the loop, then you've got to have kydex and an eyelet that high, and then you've got to have finger clearance above that, which means your outside the waistband holster ends up running really high. For small guns, for women or any shooters who have a short torso or long arms, if that gun rides too high, drawing up here is really awkward. So one of the advantages is these allow you to run the outside the waistband holster lower. The trade-off is, because the hardware attachment points are so close together, you have fewer options to give your user cant adjustments. Because you go down 3/4 of an inch and you're already at the next bottom eyelet. And so you can't do a pattern. If the holes are spaced further apart, like the original RCS or the holster loop, these open loops, you can do a couple of different sets of eyelets, top and bottom, before the top runs into the bottom. They never run into the bottom. The clip is tall enough to avoid that. So the holster has to be bigger, and you especially need more material down at the outside bottom corner of the holster to use these effectively. Closed loops allow a smaller profile, especially at the bottom corner, but they limit your cant adjustment options. So I was just working on an outside the waistband holster where he wanted like 5-degree adjustments. And it isn't workable with the closed loop he wanted to use. It was the OTG hex loop, and I think I talked him out of it. I hope so. So these are set up properly, and the IFI ones are set up properly. Let me grab those. I'll have to pull these off a holster. This is the NSR version, 3 holes. This is the index fastener version, a hole and a slot. And the NSR ones are a little bit wider side to side. These ones are a little bit narrower. Spacing doesn't have to be perfectly spaced. For closed loops, I like the DIY P-shape fine adjustment loop inversion or gross adjustment lower loop installment by moving down eyelet pairs. Yeah, John, you're talking about these loops. And that is nice. With one attachment inside and one attachment outside, you can either set up an eyelet, a pattern of eyelets and go to the next pair down, or you can simply flip the loop and get your adjustment that way. The trade-off is, if you want to use a trapezoidal loop, you can't just flip it as easily. Things can get a little messed up that way. The other thing this affects is gun splits. And if you're making light bearing especially, back in the day, before I had a CNC, when I was making outside the waistband molds, I was working on non-50-50 splits because I didn't have access to a reliable source of trapezoidal loops. I was using these guys. They are fixed height, they're fairly shallow, and the light channel on a light bearing outside the waistband holster is big. You have to be able to get the belt around it. And so the best way I could come up with to solve that issue was to actually mold most of the thickness of the gun and light into the outside plate and leave the back more shallow. I didn't do full flat backs, and I don't like the curved jig 90-10 thing that guys are doing in a membrane former. It's not my thing. And actually, that's a funny thing. When guys have started doing that, what they found, because almost all the hardware in the industry was developed with 50-50 splits in mind, when they started doing 90-10 splits, like these DIY loops, they're quite tall. There's a lot of room in there. If you put 90% of the gun thickness in the front plate and 10% in the back, and then you put this loop on, the whole holster floats off your belt with an air gap behind it, because the clip is so tall, which means the whole holster sticks out, the whole gun is further out, and concealment suffers. And so guys have actually been struggling to find an outside the waistband loop that is shallow enough this way to take a 90-10 holster and suck it in tight to the body. So I was bandsawing blue guns and then DIY drones and multi-molds bandsawing them at like 65, 35-35 or 60-40 splits in order to be able to get away with using the same loops and the same hardware on all my holsters and not having to keep track of trapezoidal for light bearing, straight clips for non-light bearing, all that jazz. And that's why RC Holster Supply released their 9010 loops, which I haven't tried and don't make holsters to test with, but I've heard some guys are using them. I don't know, haven't really kept track of them. So there's this intimate connection between design decisions, what features you want the holster to have, how you intend to process it, whether you're going to press form it using a scissor jack press, you're going to use a coffee bum style press, whether you're going to split mold with a membrane or non-membrane vacuum former, whether you're going to do outside with wing angles integrated or you're going to mold flat and then heat and fold. All those things affect the order of steps you go in, and that affects when you mount the hardware, when you do your final trimming. It's not like chicken and egg, it's like chickens and eggs all the time. What gun belts do I run? Bobby Jackson, I am a big fan. I was one of Matt Gibson at Volan Gear Works' original 100 clients. This is actually this was my very first Volan belt. It's my shop belt. I carry appendix all the time. I really like the Icw G Hook Buckle, which just has a loop on one side and a hook that goes through it. It has no moving parts. I tried to do the whole Cobra Buckle thing, and I just can't dig it. There are several companies that offer the Icw G Hook on a belt. I know SOE has one. I had one of those. It was not nearly as well thought out and well designed as the Volan one. It didn't have a keeper on the tab side, so your two belts didn't lock together. I didn't like it. I gave it away. I've done the Aries Ranger belt. I've done the SOE. Done a bunch of the Wilderness belts. I really like the Atlas belts. I also have the Volan Cobra Buckle belt. It's fine as far as Cobra Buckle belts go. I'm just not a big fan of Cobra Buckles. I don't think, for the ridiculous amount of force that those buckles can handle, it's totally overkill, and they're blocky, and I'm a guitar player. And so I don't take this rig off if I just pick up a guitar at home and I'm playing. And I had a Cobra Buckle scratch up the back of one of my guitars. I don't know if Sam Cummins is here. John says he got the Atlas Slim G Hook. Yeah, it's a great belt. Matt Gibson's doing things right. I don't know. You always run into weird little cases, weird from your perspective since you stumble into them. There's a lot of bad blood between particular players in this industry that you don't know about until you accidentally step into it. Hang on one second. Let me turn on another light here. Yeah, that seems better. Cobra Forever. The area. If you want a non-Cobra stiff belt, I like the Aries Aegis as well. I don't carry one. It's a nice belt concept. It's one of the better looking for formal carry nylon belts. I had a custom leather gun belt made. I've had a crossbreed. I never did the Belt Man, but I looked at them. There were a number of leather options, and I'm a skinny guy. If I'm not carrying, I wear like a 30-inch waist or 29-inch waist. I'm skinny. And so pin and buckle belts never work well for me. I am always right in between the adjustments. And so something like the Volan belt or even the Cobra belts that have a sliding tail so you can cinch the adjustment, that's critical for me, because otherwise I just can't get it to fit. Aries Ranger is my next one. One of my first expensive gun belts back in the day, I got a hold of Jake Sebbins and had him build me a Velcro back enhanced Ranger belt. And he actually emailed me back and was like, "Why do you want Velcro on this?" And I said, "Well, I'm a holster maker." And he replied, "You're not attaching holsters with Velcro, are you?" "I hope not." And I wasn't, but occasionally I made small knife sheaths, like or like bench-made rescue hook sheaths, really small things that would get tucked away behind the belt with Velcro attachments. And I needed a belt that had a loop on the inside so I could test those. So he made that belt, and literally, it was this thick. It was ridiculous. It was incredibly stiff. I wore it to the range. I think I wore it to USPSA. But it was unworkable for me for everyday carry. It was like I had a hula hoop. I'm so skinny front to back that belt would like float out in front of me and behind me. I could not get it to lay flat front and back. Bio belt. Yeah, the Bullhide Bio belt is biothane. It's the same material I get my soft loops made out of, just a really wide, thick version. The black version with silver hardware looks good. It's a little bit 90s pleated khaki Dockers kind of look, not my thing. The brown Bio belt looks terrible. It just looks like rubber. Mean Gene Leather. I've heard good things about Mean Gene Leather. I have not handled any of his stuff. I'm just not big on leather. I think nylon, for what we're doing, works so well that unless you need the look of leather in order to sort of blend into your environment, wherever you are, wherever you work and how you dress, I don't think it offers any advantages performance-wise over nylon. And I don't usually tuck. I'm almost always carrying a shirt over. So for me, the look of the belt's almost a non-issue. As long as it carries comfortably, has good adjustability, and is low profile in the front for a pennant carry, I'm happy. And the Voland belt checks all those boxes for me. Did I have to run it through a planer to fit it through your pants loops? Not quite, but I did often have to put the belt and everything on my pants before I put the pants on, because I could not. The belt was so stiff. You couldn't maneuver it through mag carriers or anything behind your back. You just didn't have enough leverage. The belt was so stiff you couldn't force it through. Jones Tactical. Oh boy, I'm gonna have a fight in the comments feed. Hey JT, did you see this? Owen just positively commented on Jones Tactical. I've never had a Jones Tactical belt. My friend JT had a really bad sales experience with them. Speaking of bad sales experiences, this is off topic, but it's shop stuff, not specifically for holsters. A month and a half ago, I posted a picture on my Instagram of a new bandsaw I had bought, a horizontal bandsaw for cutting metal, for CNC machining stuff. And it had showed up in a crate, and it must have gotten dropped because the motor mount had broken loose from the frame of the saw. I bought this from northerntool.com. And I called him up. JT says no comment. I've had it since 2012. JT, he was the guy who was right in front of you in line, whose belt took 6 months. And that's why Jones Tactical couldn't get yours on time, because it was making these nuclear apocalypse-proof belts for Owen. But the saw arrived obviously seriously damaged. I got a return authorization, and the lady I talked to in customer service told me that they would ship me a new saw before the old one came back in. So they'd pass in the mail, and I'd get my new one. Well, 2 weeks went by, and the new saw didn't show up. I got distracted, didn't notice it, and finally was like, where's my new saw? So I called him up, talked to somebody else, and he said, oh, a saw never got sent. I'm really sorry. I'll take care of that. At this point, I've been without the saw I ordered for a month. It took 2 weeks to get to me, which was too long already. Then it was broken. Then 2 weeks, no replacement came, and never got sent. And so I was not happy with the customer service, because the second person said, yeah, what the first customer service rep told you was just all wrong. All that info was all screwed up. So he said he would get one sent. It would happen this time. He was very sorry about the delay. And I sent the first saw back, and waited 2 more weeks, no replacement saw. Called Northern Tool back, got a third, different rep in customer service, and was told, I'm sorry, a saw hasn't shipped yet. Those are out of stock. It's been 6 weeks since I ordered. I don't have a working saw. I've sent the broken one back. I have not gotten a replacement, and they're out of stock. Nobody called. Nobody emailed me. There was no communication from the company at all that the product that I had paid for, that I was owed, wasn't in stock. And so I groaned, but tried to be polite on the phone and asked, when are you going to have it in stock? This was at the beginning of July. They told me they hoped to have it back in stock by the middle to end of August. So not only was there no communication, but they were a month and a half out on projected resupply. That's terrible customer service. The lack of communication there is appalling. Oh yeah, oh man, I was like, I'm not getting off the phone until I have my refund. I want it today, I want it now. And I was polite but very, very insistent. I got my money refunded, Northern Tool. Shame on you, terrible customer service. But this is part of the same inventory supply side thing we deal with hardware. They're getting these saws from China. If they run out or there's a problem and they need to reorder, it takes weeks, sometimes months, for them to get their stuff. And I'm always amazed when I hop on Kydex Pro or the Kydex Pro Facebook group or any of these places, and I see holster makers who are running a business, running around with their hair on fire because they need 5 struts or they need a 12 by 12 piece of some color. And this is basic business stuff. You can't afford to risk your brand by not being able to fill orders on time because you didn't hold a safe amount of inventory. It's like having an emergency fund in case you lose your job and have to buy food and pay rent. And guys really hurt themselves if you offer 150,000 colors and you offer foamies and struts and overhooks and soft loops and you offer all these different attachments. You can't afford to keep all that in inventory. And so you're constantly juggling and losing track of what's in, what's out, and then you think, okay, I'm almost out. I'll just go to Index and order, and then Index is out, and you are stuck. So that's my rant on supply. The basic break-even is buy enough inventory that you can survive in case of a supply shortage. That goes for sheet plastic, that's screws, that's belt loops, whatever you need, whatever you can't fill orders without, stock enough of it you can survive a supply side shortage. Cryptek all the time. I usually only buy Cryptek a couple $1,000s worth at a time. And then I get a whole bunch of it. Like there was one time when Yeti came back into stock and I went and bought it all. Because I had a project that needed a bunch of Yeti. And I don't remember how much I bought, but it was boxes of Yeti. And so that's always kind of fun to have $5,000 or $6,000 worth of Cryptek show up at the shop. But I use it up till it's gone, and I don't do this nickel and dime. Keeping track of inventory is $1 cost. The time you have to spend, the time you spend on the website ordering stuff, waiting for sales. Like when good sales come up, 10% off from Index saves me money. You know, that might save me $300 or $400 on a plastic order. That's great. That's money back in my pocket. I will eat the inventory cost of keeping that to save that money and know I've got it when I need it. It's worth it to me. I'm to blame. Yeah, sometimes it is me. Recently, Raptor was the thing recently. I called Steve Andrews and I asked him, I was going to order some Raptor, and he was out, and then he called me back the next morning and said, I just got like 46 2x4s in, and I almost dropped the hammer on all of them. And then I realized that everybody was just going to be upset with me. They wouldn't know it was me, but people would be upset because other guys have been waiting for it too. So I restrained myself and did not buy that entire batch of Raptor out. I bought enough to do what I needed initially, but I'm going to have to reorder again because I've almost used it up again. But it is fun. Once you move volume, you really can start buying big batches of stuff. Buying 30 4x8 foot sheets at a time of plastic is a great feeling. That delivery comes in, you unload it off the truck, and you know, I've got the next 1,200 holsters or the next 1,400 holsters here, right here. There's no plastic supply issue that's going to cripple me. When there was that whole sparkle thing, Or if you're selling holsters, save a few out of inventory in case you have CS issues. Yeah, when you run big batches, set aside 10. That way, if you have a problem, a customer breaks one, something happens and you have to send a holster out, you just pull it out of a bin. You're not having to stop what you're doing, derail production, and make one. Yes, Justin, Raptor is the new one that looks like leather. It's cool stuff. I haven't made any holsters out of it yet, but I have been making some other things out of it. When there was that whole, a couple years ago, there was that whole thing with Sparkle Kydex. I guess now Sparkle Kydex might be a thing, but at the time it was a production problem. And that whole thing completely missed me. I had enough inventory that I didn't have to reorder at all during that entire period of time when guys were flipping out and sending back plastic and complaining on the forums about sparkling Kydex. I wasn't buying anything. I was set. Yeah, Clark, I offer black. For customer-specific projects where I OEM a volume of parts, I make with whatever plastic they want. So it can be Holstex, it can be Boltron, it can be Kydex, it can be any color they want. But if a customer is buying an OEM part from me and they spec pink carbon fiber, I probably don't stock that for anything else but that one thing I'm making for them. And so depending on the plastic, that affects the price of their OEM part because I'm not going to buy 30 4x8 sheets of pink carbon fiber. I'd end up sitting on almost all of it, and I can't eat the stuff. I suppose I could eat the stuff. Pink probably tastes like cotton candy. I don't know if anybody's tried it. But all these hardware things, all these hardware decisions go with your design decisions. And the more you invest in a process, the more you invest in molds, the harder it is, the more optimized and efficient a process is, the harder it is to change the process. The process becomes less flexible as it becomes more optimized. Hello, Tom Kelly. But lately, these the RCS claw on the VG2 tuckable claw and the non-tuckable claw that goes on the Eidolon, these are all the rage, and attaching those drives design decisions. Obviously, whatever hardware you're going to use affects what your hole spacing is. It affects where around the outline of the holster you leave material. It affects what size screws, what length screws. All those decisions are driven by hardware, and changes in hardware affect the design and back and forth. Oh, here's a few other ones that are... this is the Fabric Clip, and these are those Warfighter adjustable outside the waistband loops. In principle, I think they're great. They really lock onto the belt tight. It's hard to get a more complex piece like this, which is several injection molded parts plus screws and washers and things. It's hard for this to be produced and purchased by you as a holster maker in enough volume to get a good price on it. These are much more expensive. You know, these guys are 60 cents a loop. These guys will never be 60 cents a loop, no matter what. But for your particular application, they may work really well. I've heard good things about the Altie Clip. I haven't tried them. I don't offer any holsters with the Fabric Clip on it, but I think the concept is sound, and it has a lot of potential. I'm not sure that this is the best version possible of this kind of concept, but it's certainly a step in the right direction. It opens some doors. It gets people thinking. And of course, the words of death. Let me get this to show up. Ladies and gentlemen, it's patent pending. So that's a whole other thing which will probably be an entire Facebook Live broadcast. Patent pending. What do you think of it? Is it a good idea? Is it even worth pursuing? Should guys do it? Cotton cancer. Attaching those is how people break holsters because they don't test stuff out. Attaching which? You mean the Fabric Clips, Tom? Have you tried them? I'm curious what your thoughts are on them. And this is the other thing. when new hardware comes on the market, you can't just take it, throw it on your holster, and start shipping orders. You have a responsibility as a designer who's making life-saving gear to test that stuff. And not just put it on and wear it around the shop, but like seriously test it. Like do some combatives, wear it in a car, do a bunch of dry fire, lots and lots of dry fire. Take a class with it. Send it to a few people you trust who have the talent of breaking things and say, break this. And if they can't, then it's probably good. If they can, figure out why they did, how they did, update it, change it, adjust the design, and then give them a new one and say, break this one. Claws and wings. Guys, break, oh, okay, yeah. So, you can buy the VG2 claw, the VG2 strut wing claw. You can buy the direct mount claw, but anytime you use somebody else's hardware, like in the case of the Eidolon hardware, it's designed specific for them. They made it so it interfaces with their holster shell. It doesn't rotate. It has the whole spacing they want. It clears around the dimensions of their trigger guard, the way that that holster's injection molded, and you end up having to work around their design. That's fine, but you have to take it into account. You can't, most of you, I can't, most of us can't afford to spec out the ideal total line of hardware for outside, inside, wings, claws, all that jazz. Most of us can't afford to spec out that entire line exactly as we would like it to function and look, and then go out and get that injection molded to our spec. That's huge amounts of money. And if you did make it super distinctive, so it looked like just yours, you wouldn't want to sell that to everybody. So there's this balance of making hardware generic enough that it's not distinctively yours, so you can afford to defray the production cost of it by selling it to other guys. And that's a tension you have to resolve for yourself. Some guys place a lot of value on cosmetic and functional distinction, differentiating their brand from other brands on the market. Other guys place a high value on function, keeping their costs low, keeping the supply chain lean, and are totally willing to design a product, outsource injection mold and production, and then sell it to anybody who will use it in whatever volume they want in order to get the best price on units and keep it in stock. Tom says the Altie Clip is a cool idea, but he's seen interesting failures that add caveats to use. Yeah, my big concern about the Altie Clip is when I'm clearing a cover garment up, I used to have a lot of issues with the spring steel style clips, and it's not that there are sharp corners, but the edge is really slim. It can hook under the hem on the inside of a garment and catch there. A number of times I caught clips and either tore shirts or bent clips because the inside hem on a button-down shirt caught as I was clearing a garment over these steel clips. That was a no-go for me. That's one of the reasons why I phased these out and stopped using them. The Altie Clip has that downward-facing metal tab that you use to open or close, to disengage or engage a little cam face mechanism to actually make the clip bite onto the fabric. If snagging a cover garment on that can pop the mechanism open, you pop the Altie Clip, you draw the gun and holster, and then you throw it at the guy. Mike Bonetti is in. Hello, Mike Bonetti. Thank you for stopping by. Good to see you. Or good to read you. You see me, I read you. Welcome. That's pretty much it for the different types of hardware. And there are all different kinds of ways of putting multiple attachment options. Guys are big on modularity. Some guys want ambidextrous holsters that are reversible left or right with ambi sweat shields. Some guys want to have a holster that can take soft loops or a foamy clip. Again, always trade-offs. If you want soft loops to be stable, put them as far apart as you can. This is one of the big advantages of hybrid holsters. Attachment points that are 6 to 7 inches apart are way more stable on the belt. The trade-off is the holster's big. If you want to put your attachment points close enough together that you can mount a foamy or a DIY quick clip, if you put two soft loops there, they're touching side by side, and you can't drop a belt loop between them. If you space them a little further apart, you can span a belt loop on your pants. A foamy clip can't do that. Well, is it designed for appendix carry or is it primarily for strong side? How many of your users are going to probably run into a belt loop that's in their way when they carry it? That might affect whether you go soft loop or foamy, and if you go soft loop, how far apart you place them. Did I miss the foamy and the like? Yeah, there was a quick discussion on the foamy. I think it's a very viable attachment. I'm not a huge fan of it. I think it works better. Well, it depends. The other thing that affects how well a foamy works is how tall your blocking for mounting it is and whether or not you have a downward sloping angle. This is a cool feature which is fairly easy to put in on a CNC machined mold, but is harder but not impossible to put in on a hand-built mold. When you have the holster body, let me grab a shell. This is a generic test shell with no blocking on the face. But if I were to add blocking to the face of this holster to put a DIY quick clip on the face, the DIYs and the foamies don't have the same dimensions on those bottom catch tabs here. Not the same. And they also don't have the same slope angle at the top where you attach them to the holster body. You have to take that into account. So depending on which clip you're using, you would change the height of your blocking off the face of the holster. Because if you block the holster, block it too strong, block it too high, you'll have a situation where the tip of the clip floats. And there's a gap right here between the clip and the body. You don't want that. That's easier, much easier for the belt to pop out and the whole holster to break free. On the flip side, if you build the blocking in with a steep downward angle, so it's really driving the tip of that clip in hard to the body, you're putting a lot of stress at this spot where the clip has that step in it. That's a stress point where the clip is more likely to fail and break. And you're putting a lot of stress on the attachment points. What you want to do is have the blocking height and the angle of the blocking. You want a little bit of downward slope. You can do it by shimming the back edge of your blocking, or if you're machining them, machining with the face of the blocking at a downward sloping angle. Yeah, there's a guy on Kydex Pro selling metal blocking. I think he's laser cutting it. It's totally cool. I haven't tried it, but it's good. If it works, great. That downward sloping angle means you get the tip of the clip registering positively against the holster body without needing to make the blocking, without needing to put too much stress on the clip. What you want is a little bit of tension, a little bit of pressing of the tip of that clip into the holster body. So you can do that by playing with your blocking until you get it just right. Soft loops are not nearly as sensitive to that kind of thing. All you need is a place to mount your screw post on the inside, and these come with my holsters come with high and low blocking, so you can adjust your overall ride height. You can also put forward cant on it by going high front, low back, and carry it strong side. I used to only offer a single ride height. I'm kind of a purist when it comes to holster design. I'm big on simplicity. I've sometimes called it an English sports car kind of thing. You know, it's all manual. It doesn't even have a radio. All it does is drive fast. I don't like Italian sports cars because they seem to be kind of, at least in my reading, I don't own any. They seem to be kind of temperamental and finicky. But my grandfather had a cool little English sports car which I used to ride in as a kid, and it was totally fun. But manual everything. Really, really simple, stripped down. I had enough guys who wanted to carry it inside the waistband strong side, though, that I updated the design to give them ride height and cant options. And it works fine for appendix. It's just one additional adjustment you can make. And of course, you can size the soft loops for 1 3/4, 1.5 inch, 1 1/4 belt, and get a nice snug fit on those. Are there any other questions about particular kinds of hardware that you guys want to ask or questions about anything else I've said so far. There's so much hardware available in the holster industry, it boggles my mind. I would not have believed the kinds of options that I could just get on a web store and purchase and have shipped to me priority in a couple of days. If you had told me, I wouldn't have believed it. This is an amazing time to be a holster maker. You can, I mean, when it comes to design work and hardware available to facilitate your design, basically the sky's the limit. You can do so much with the hardware that's available. And it's affordable too. You can get really good prices on stuff. And this is one of the advantages. People have asked before, we've talked before about the kydex market being a bubble. There being tons and tons of new small companies. And it seems like every week I run across Gotcha. Yeah, offering adjustments is fine to a point. If you give the end user too many adjustments, too many options, it can get overwhelming for them. I want to give them a holster that works out of the box. I know that the stock configuration will work, but that they have the option to adjust it a little bit and tweak it to match their preference a little more. But too many options can get paralyzing. It's like I was at the store and it's just, I don't know what I was trying to buy. I was trying to buy bar soap or something. Like, I just want soap, you know? Rub on your hands, foams up, soap. It's just so many options. It's overwhelming. You're looking at it and it's just too much. Too much. And don't even get me started on craft beer. Just stop it. But you can get all kinds of cool stuff made, all kinds of cool holster designs done, and made using off-the-shelf hardware that works really well. It's made in the U.S. It's available with short turnaround times in flexible quantities at a great price. And all this stuff has come to market because the kydex industry has gotten big enough for holster makers themselves to be their whole own market. I operate in two completely separate markets. I sell to gun carriers, but more of my business actually is holster makers as my primary customers. There are enough holster makers in the industry that is a large and viable client base for me to build my company on, offering supply services, design, molds, consulting, and OEM parts to holster makers. And there's enough demand among gun owners and gun carriers that those holster makers can justify spending the money on tooling, spending the money on swift presses, spending the money on consulting, spending the money on design, spending the money on OEM parts, because they have enough market to push volume of that stuff and get the ROI on it. It's a great time to be in holster making. There's tons of options. And social media means you can reach all the way to your end users, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat. You can get instant information out there quickly, just like this, and answer questions, show your products, show their capabilities. This is marketing I couldn't have bought in 2008, 2009. There was no way for me to do this. I had a dumb phone. So I'm really excited to be here. It's cool to be able to show you guys the things I have in my shop, to show you some of my process, to show you things I'm machining, to show you ideas I'm working on. Customers like fiddling with things. Yeah, they do, Clark. I went back and forth on adjustable retention. I didn't offer it, then I did offer it, then I didn't offer it, then I did offer it, and now I don't offer it. That's funny, Rob. Yeah, so let me know in comments or send me a DM over on Instagram. Just get a hold of me if there are particular questions or topics you want to have covered. Obviously, intellectual property, patent pending, and giving design credit where credit is due can be its whole own discussion topic, because there's a lot of misinformation about how patents work, what they mean, what they don't, and how to work with them. There are so many overlapping designs and so many influences that are just percolating in the holster world that it's very hard to do something that is truly distinctive. Almost everything draws on features from multiple other places, and so it's good to give props to holster makers who inspired you, designs you saw that influenced you, ideas you've seen that you like, that you want to emulate. And then people get really upset about credit. And sometimes it's understandable, sometimes it's not. It can be really hard to prove who had an idea first. There's a concept in design called the adjacent possible, which is anytime a new discovery or a new technology opens up a field, a bunch of new people start working in underdeveloped areas and tend to make parallel discoveries around the same time. The classic example is Leibniz and Newton discovered calculus independently at basically the same time. Not exactly the same time, but close enough that it really was a parallel discovery. Neither one of them was cribbing off the other one. And that kind of thing happens when technology in the holster industry changes. When vacuum forming started becoming more affordable and guys started doing it, when it wasn't just a couple of guys hand-making vacuum presses and putting up a couple of short YouTube clips. Once Blue Light Tactical and then HD, and once those presses started coming out and guys started adopting that technology, a whole bunch of new designs started proliferating because it became cost-effective to produce them. New hardware options open up new design options. New design ideas demand new hardware, which then opens up further design ideas, refinements, developments, adaptations. It's totally cool. Yeah, and that's the flip side of the coin. Parallel or concurrent design is one thing. Straight up ripping off things happens too. And it's bad. There's no doubt that there are tiers of quality and tiers of originality in the holster industry. There are some guys who have a long history with a core product line that is distinctively theirs in terms of which models they support, what options they offer, how it functions, how it's designed to be worn, and they have a track record of that design. They're clearly in that space. They're working there. They might refine, they might update, bring in new features, but they were there. And then there are holster makers who, every time some cool new thing drops, 2 weeks later or 2 days later, they have a poorly executed version of it on their Instagram feed. And I think it is true that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, but it's also frustrating. It happened to me recently. I saw something that I made get badly ripped off. Not ripped off at high volume, but ripped off at poor quality. And you can be frustrated with it. You can, take to social media and try to get your pound of flesh, or you can just say, you know what? I'd rather spend my time making a quality product, making it quickly, delivering parts to my customers, keeping my clients happy, and just not sweating people in the same space who don't design, they just copy. Every industry has that. If you spend time on social media, you'll obviously see it in the holster industry. And there are only so many ways to make a Kydex holster is the common refrain. And it's true to a point. There are a limited number of ways that a certain material with certain engineering properties can be utilized. It's physics. But that doesn't mean that that copying is no longer copying. There is a box, there's a space, we're inside the space is getting bigger, we're all in different parts of it, we're working on our own stuff, and you can work toward developing your own thing, toward refining your own thing, or not. And when I see holsters, a game I play is anytime I have a chance to check out somebody's holster, I try to reverse engineer their entire process in my mind. I look at their holster, I guess what molds they're using. I can obviously tell what hardware they're using. That's as plain as day. What molds are they using? How are they forming? If they're forming with split molds, which split molds? How are they heating when they fold? How are they sanding? What kind of edge finishing are they using? Are they using Scotch-Brite? Are they hand sanding? Are they using a buffing wheel? If they're using a buffing wheel, are they doing compound? Are they going gloss? Are they going matte? I try to just walk back step by step through the whole process and envision how the holster was made. And oftentimes you can tell a ton of information about a guy's shop and about how he works by just looking at his finished product. If you have eyes to see it, there are maker's marks all over the stuff. And I think that comes from my history as a violin making student. So I have a degree in lutherie and spent years studying Italian instruments. Ruggeri's, I've handled Strads, I've handled Guadagnini's, I've handled all kinds of really, really fine instruments from the late 16s, 1700s, 1800s. I've handled $1 million instruments. Totally awesome. If you look at them, they are super distinctive. Topic, consistent quality holster folding. Tyler, you kill me. Generally, though, Clark, I don't think most customers do see it. I think the ability of most customers to see, there's a layer of design stuff and quality stuff that they do see. If edges are sharp, and if you rub the edge and the edge has a burr and it's sharp, customers will notice that. If the edge has a lot of sanding marks or bandsaw marks in it, the customer will notice that. But a lot of the fine details, most customers won't notice because they don't have a grid to understand the materials and the tooling that's used. And so I can look at something and say, press formed, vac formed. I can look at it and get a good idea. Not 100%, but you can get a pretty good idea from looking at it just in a snap how it was made. And with fine instruments, you can look at it and you can figure out what the order of steps were. Did they carve this feature before they carved that feature? By looking at the tool marks. Where are the sanding marks? Where are the knife marks? Where are the plane marks in the wood? How was the varnish applied? How was this glued together? It's detective stuff. You can explode the thing, take the thing apart in your mind and look at it, and it's fascinating. And so looking at guys' holsters and figuring out how they're bending their wings, whether they're riveting flat and then bending, whether they're bending, then drilling, then riveting, there's all kinds of cool things to look at in a holster. I just find it fun. It's kind of a parlor game. You know, see somebody's rig or just IDing work by sight. It's hard to be distinctive in a market this cluttered. And if you find a way to do it, if you can cosmetically differentiate your holsters so that users have the best chance possible of recognizing it, visible logoing is the best way to do it. But I don't like logoing on clips generally. I know that Crossbreed got a lot of flack for putting a cross on their metal spring steel tuckable clips. And the biggest reason I didn't like it, I'm a Christian. I've got no issue with putting a cross on things. It's, you know, it was Mark Craighead's company. He's dead now, but his company, he can and should do what he likes with it. But I don't ever want to draw attention to attachments, especially if the holster is designed to be tucked and concealed. And so I understand putting logoing stuff on outside the waistband stuff where it's designed to be seen. The same reason I think it's kind of funny to spend a lot of time and energy putting a lot of color options on your website for holsters that are inside the waistband. I understand the end user might have fun with it. Yep, so Mike, that's why Mike has one red eyelet on his holster. That's a great tie-in. That's a really simple, low cost. He's not having to pay for laser engraving or decals or anything fancy. It just takes one eyelet, it's red, puts it in there. That's, I think, one of the cleanest and simplest kinds of branding that I've seen in the holster world. And I think it was a great idea, Mike. The only downside to it is, as branding, it has no text. People who recognize your brand, who know of Red Eye Tactical, and have seen the red eyelet before, will recognize it. And people who see it for the first time may remember it. Oh, it had a red eyelet, but it's not a logo. It's not specifically tied to your brand, but it's 90% there. It's a great step in the right direction. Simple, clear branding. plugs into your table. Owen spends money on fancy print kydex for inside the waistband carry. A lot of guys do. It's the tactical accessorizing thing. I laugh when guys get bent when they want to buy P-mags and all their furniture matches, but there aren't P-mags of the right color in stock. Dude, really? You're going to skip a great deal on P-mags because they don't have OD green, and you need OD green to match your handguard, your forend, and your stock, and your grip, and your Cerakote job. You have to have it. You can't live without it. I don't know. Kevin, I have done YouTube videos on the Swift Press setup. I'll be doing another Facebook Live video on it, answering questions in real time on it. So there'll be more info on that. In the meantime, if you have specific questions about the Swift Press and how to use it, email me. It is getting pretty late. I still have parts to run on the mill. Mike is getting a new mold run tonight. So is Tom Kelly. So I got to get cracking at that because I got to hit the road for Indianapolis bright and early tomorrow. So that's it. Thank you for stopping by for the hardware and design and attachments video. I hope some of the info was useful to you. I've spent a lot of time thinking about different design options and different hardware and trying it out and wearing it around and coming up with designs that use the hardware that I prefer for function's sake. For me, cosmetics are always a level below. My design is always driven by function. It has to be secure, it has to be accessible, it has to draw cleanly, it has to be concealable. Comfortable is a step below. I realize, guys, some people won't carry a gun if the holster isn't super comfortable, but I see holster designs that are driven by comfort as their primary factor, and they're lousy designs. They make compromises in security, they make compromises in retention, they make all kinds of compromises for the sake of comfort. And it's terrible, it's not worth it. It doesn't matter how comfortable the holster is, if you can't quickly, reliably access the gun and get it out, the holster is hurting you. It's hindering your ability to protect yourself. So, as always, thank you for stopping in. I forgot to ask you guys to invite people to the live feed. I'm going to start working on my opening talk script that I'll come through a couple times in the talk, reminding people to like the post, comment on it, invite people if they're on Facebook, invite some friends, or text some other holster makers. So I will start posting updates on Facebook and Instagram. Anytime I'm going to do a live video, I'll post a warning up. So if you see it and want to come over and you know somebody else who would be interested, please let them know. And I look forward to spending some time with you next week here on Holster Stuff. So that's it for tonight.